We miss them, we fall in love with them, we judge them. There's a reason why when we finish a great book, we don't say, that was a clever plot. Twists, maybe, but even those we forget pretty easily. What really leaves a mark in our hearts is the characters of the book. The author may be the one who tells you the story, but it's the character and his voice who immerses us into the story. They take our hand and they stay with us. Hi, I'm Sasha, a girl from Ukraine who lives in South Africa, and I'm passionate about all things stories, whether reading or writing one. With this video, I'm opening a series of videos where I'm aiming to help you to build unique and recognizable character for your story. This said, I have to mention that I'm not a seasoned writer myself by any means, and all what I'm talking about here is just my attempt in figuring out the art of storytelling, having fun, and hoping that someone else will find it useful as well. Creating a vivid character is one of the hardest things a writer can do, not because we lack imagination, but because we tend to mistake personality for presence. We think that if we just list enough traits, witty, stubborn, curious, we'll get someone real. We've heard enough about how today's heroes have become flat, how the attempt to portray a strong, independent woman in tune with modern culture often slip into the tantrums of spoiled heroines. Things aren't any better with male characters. Masculinity has become almost synonymous with toxic behavior, or on the other hand, we get the good boy, the overly agreeable, unthreatening type that modern writers seem to favor. We've grown used to a set of cliches from which most contemporary characters are built. I will do it myself, or you are not going anywhere, have become the very essence of personality. Of course, there are exceptions, but we're talking about what sells best. The second problem writers face is that they know their characters are supposed to have flaws, but in trying to make them real, they often fall out of rhythm, forgetting that every character must have their own behavioral nuances, and that those nuances must remain consistent. From my own experience writing a novel, I can say that keeping a character's behavior coherent, just like maintaining the tone of your writing, the style of it, is incredibly hard unless you understand the range your character belongs to, the inner scale on which their personality moves. In my opinion, most modern authors fail not because they can't write well, but because they confuse description with existence. They give their characters perfect backstories, clever dialogue, a moral dilemma, but still somehow nothing moves. The person doesn't rise from the paper, they remain a collection of gestures and moods, like an actor caught mid rehearsal waiting for direction, something made, carefully curated to meet audience expectations. We live in an age of aesthetic characters, not authentic ones. We design them as if for poster. She is fierce but fragile, he is toxic but broken. So once again, they exist in concepts, not contradictions. But real people are contradictions. Real people are messy. They change their tone depending on who's watching. They say one thing and mean another. They want something deeply, but they need something else entirely. There's always something, that's something which unites all these contradictions deep within. The question though stays the same: how to identify that something? Most books in writing will tell you that a good character needs motivation, goals, and conflict. They will hand you the blueprint of a story, what your protagonist wants, what stands in their way, what they risk losing it if they fail. It's useful advice, but kind of mechanical, because human beings are not built from bullet points, they are shaped by longing, fear, memory, and contradictions again. When I finally decided to take my never-ending desire to tell stories seriously, I devoured every book I could find on the writing craft. I read about 3x structures, inciting incidents, turning points, and journeys. I learned what good characters are supposed to be and what they are not. These books brought examples from beloved classics, characters who seemed to breathe on their own, and yet none of them could truly explain to me how to create one. It felt a little like jumping from directing to delegating. They told me what a vivid character should do, but not how to bring her or him into being. The first most guide's goal is to remind us that our character must be real, must have flaws, must contain an inner conflict. That well known principle Robert Mackie calls the battle between desire and need. And yes, understanding those principles is vital, but when you are alone in front of your file, that empty document where your protagonist is supposed to appear, theory suddenly feels very thin. I would sit there trying to pin down my heroine's desire and need, and everything sounded too small, too external. Her want couldn't simply be the justice or love or desire to belong, something in her restless, wandering nature, which I could pick up about her, begged for a deeper dive. That's when I began to see what those manuals were missing. They taught me how to design a story, but not how to discover a soul. And that's a real difference. Craft books can give you structure. They can tell you where the beats should fall and when the tension must rise, but they cannot tell you who your character is at their core, because that knowledge doesn't come from theory. It comes from listening, from observing, from intuition, from recognizing that every living, breathing character begins not with a plot function, but with a pattern, an inner architecture older than the story itself. At some point, something clicked for me. I guess it was the years I had spent pursuing a career as a psychologist. More than anything else, I was fascinated by the differences in how people communicate. Some seem to understand each other almost wordlessly, as if they are tuned to the same frequency, like those encrypted messages in John Wick that only reach the right receivers. While others, no matter how hard they try, seem to speak entirely different languages. And it wasn't just communication, it was right about everything. Some people find horror films thrilling, others can't bear them. Some believe that the perfect partner is the one who warms your hands, others crave someone fierce and unstoppable. Some seek quiet lives, others are restless until they burn through every map possible. It made me wonder, what is it that makes us so recognizably human and yet so differently wired? Why do we respond to the same situations with utterly opposite instincts? Courage or retreat, attachment or solitude, rebellion or surrender? Yes, our families, schools, and cultures do shape us, and yet there was something else. That curiosity led me through countless personality theories, typologies, and psychological models, each one an attempt to capture the mystery of human nature. I could endlessly talk now about different types of logic, perceptions, and intuition. Each offered a fragment of truth, a shard of the mirror, but it wasn't quite enough. And if you know anything about personality typologies, most of them fall to the one root, which would be the archetypes. Now, before you say, all right, you lost me here, bear with me 5 more minutes. We will not follow the hero's journey or some mystical route. We are also not going towards 12 archetypes every writer should know about. Rather, we will take the essence of the archetype described by Carl Jung and take the freedom to turn it into something far more fun. Jung was describing something astonishingly practical, the idea that we inherit not just physical traits or instincts, but psychic patterns, recurring forms of imagination and behavior that shape how we see the world. Think of them as universal characters living inside us. Jung called it the collective unconscious, the inherited landscape of symbols and instincts passed through centuries not by genetics but by stories. We may never have fought in a war or lived in a monastery, yet when we read of those who did, something ancient in us notes, I know this. Our imaginations, they are not empty blanks, they are layered palimpsests, written and rewritten by myth, literature, cinema, and our own quiet observations of life. When I say the hermit, what comes to mind? You probably don't need me to explain, the image is already there. Someone solitary, inward focused, wise, a little wounded perhaps, wearing some filthy rags, living in a lighthouse. And what about the nurturer or the ruler? We feel it instantly, almost physically. That recognition, that flash of understanding, is the sign of an archetype at work. The human mind doesn't invent these patterns, it remembers them. We know that we wouldn't be able to find a hermit on a stage. It's hard to imagine a ruler gently wrapping someone's wounds. They are the architecture of our inner world, inherited for centuries of stories, myths, and shared experiences. That's why when a person walks into a room presenting themselves as a rebel while looking rather as an innocent child, something in us quietly disagrees. We feel as while watching a bad spectacle where we don't believe a single word pronounced by an actor. It's not judgment, it's recognition. Our intuition knows when the costume fits and when it's borrowed. This is the very secret every great storyteller understands, even if unconsciously. Characters that endure are not invented, they are discovered. They tap into these old frequencies of the human spirit, the ones that make us say, I know this person, even when we never met them before. That's what makes the character resonate with us. This is what makes him or her memorable and real. The idea of hero's journey is that there's character and he moves through stages. The call to adventure, the ordeal, the return, and often through this journey, the character passes through several archetypes. They might start as innocent, become a warrior, meet a mentor, flirt with a shadow, and emerge transformed. It's a nice model and it works for epic storytelling, but here's the thing, it treats archetypes like costumes you can swap. The character moves from one to another and the story tracks the change. It may be fascinating to read ancient tales meeting each other across the world in the same pattern, but I doubt we would appreciate reading all modern stories sounding the same and their characters swapping the same costumes. In other words, the hero's journey often asks the archetype to change completely. My approach, or my theory, asks the archetype to change within, to explore every nuance, every note, every shadow, and in doing so, create characters who are richer, more human, and deeply resonant. With it comes my second clarification. I'm not offering blueprints. You won't find here a strict formula, and I don't believe in this, rather a character building worksheet, something to inspire you and give you something to work with. Let's think about it as about music. Every archetype is like a key, very different in its own harmony, but they have plenty of chords to produce unique and beautiful melody. If you play in that key, your character will true, no matter how complex or unpredictable they become. Step outside of it, and even the most dramatic transformations will ring false. That doesn't mean that some of the keys don't blend well, but that's a topic for a different video. That's why readers don't believe in sudden changes. They don't trust when a coward becomes a hero overnight, or when a cruel man suddenly turns tender without reason. It's not because change is impossible, it's because it doesn't follow the melody of the soul we've come to know. Real transformation doesn't erase what came before, it deepens it, or at least it's supposed to. So instead of asking, how can I make my character different, ask, how can I make their nature evolve within its own harmony? Let's say you begin with the innocent child, trusting, open, full of wonder, not scared of beginning. Halfway through the story, you see her raising a sword, fighting like a warrior. It could easily feel implausible, too abrupt, too cinematic, but the truth is, every archetype is capable of everything. The most exquisite paintings are done by mixing the same color in 1,000 different shapes. The difference lies in how they do it. The innocent will fight too, but she won't choose the sword. And even if forced to use one, there's going to be a very different system of beliefs behind it. That's something the authors of those craft books encourage us to do, to find a character's own voice. and that belief, that emotional key, is what makes the moment ring true. Say a character should stay within the same key, of course, it doesn't mean they must remain the same. It means that their evolution or even their downfall must sound like a continuation of their own song. Every archetype has two sides to its melody, the light and the shadow. Ignore one and your character feels flat. Embrace both and they breathe. Take Gatsby, for instance. He is unmistakably a magician, the man who turns dreams into glittering reality. He bends the whole world with his will. The parties, the champagne, the light of Daisy's dog, it all shimmers because of him. That's the luminous side of the magician, the alchemist who transforms longing into beauty. But there's also his shadow, the illusionist, the bad magician who hides a trick behind the smoke. He conjures wealth from corruption, builds palaces upon lies, and believes that he can resurrect the past through sheer desire. It's the same archetype, the same power, only turned slightly, revealing its darker reflection. Or let's talk about Elizabeth Bennet. She is often called witty or independent because at her core she is a rebel, not the one who breaks for the sake of chaos, but one who refuses to bow to a falsehood. Her rebellion is moral. She questions, challenges, provokes. Yet within the same archetype lies her strength and tenderness, because the rebel, at their best, are not merely defiant, they are faithful to truth, even when it costs them comfort. Her stubbornness becomes integrity, her sharpness becomes clarity. That's still the rebel, only purified and changed by love and growth. Archetypes leave us pairs of opposites, creation and destruction, innocence and corruption, wisdom and blindness. We often see the archetype of a lover presented in its highest and lowest form. Her or his capacity for passion gives their life its color, but it also takes it away. The craft books often tell us to give characters flaws, but flaws aren't added like seasoning, they are the shadow of the same gift. The archetype already carries both light and dark within it. Your work is to turn it in the light until both sides show. That's when the story begins to feel alive, when your hero's strength threatens to destroy them, and their weaknesses, paradoxically, saves them. Archetypes help us hear when a note doesn't belong, when a gesture or line of dialogue breaks the key. To keep that key, to keep the consistency of the personality and still show the change within it, that to me seems to be one of the most important skills for a writer to possess, and one of the hardest ones. And the reader, whether they realize it or not, feels that harmony and believes it. For a long time, I too believed that writing was purely a creative gift, something you either have or you don't. You either produce raw, instinctive, vivid, unusual characters and stories, or you simply never will. But of course, there's a reason it's called a craft. What we usually mistake for genius or inspiration often comes down to years of deliberate practice. At least we don't expect someone holding a paintbrush or a frying pan for the first time to create a masterpiece or a Michelin star dish. A good art requires hours and days of practice, learning from others, advice from those who done it before, and a lot of constructive feedback. Only after that we begin to create something truly remarkable and truly our own. So, before we can write something extraordinary, we must first learn and have something solid to build upon. One of the best starting points, in my experience, is to borrow from what history has already refined. That's why I turn to archetypes. This series is hopefully to create a map of those languages, 20 or so faces of the human condition, stripped of their mysticism and turned back into story. We'll talk about who they are when they laugh, when they fail, when they're under pressure. We will dress them, feed them, place them in cities and families and strange coincidences, because that's how fiction becomes human again, when we remember that every new character is somehow and also a new name. An archetype is not a stereotype. It's not a shortcut to the brave hero or the wise mentor. It's a psychological pattern, a recurring rhythm of human experience we recognize. This is all what I have for today. I'm excited to begin this new journey and share my theories and hopefully have some fun. I hope you find this video useful. If so, please like it and leave your comment to know where did it resonate with you, where you didn't like it, and I'm excited to meet you again. Until the next letter, yours S.